Hi guys, welcome back to Tigre Aitana. My name is Abby, and today I have a special video for you guys because I've been kind of putting this together slowly but surely, ever since Game of Thrones ended, because I wanted to kind of do a video on this topic for a while now. But basically I kind of wanted to pick some of my favorite witches from Game of Thrones, really the main ones, and really look at what like the five lessons that we can learn from the witches of Game of Thrones. And it's gonna go from, like, I guess it's not gonna go in order of abilities or anything like that. Just mainly talking about different lessons that I noticed that they brought to the story, that kind of the main characters who they kind of related to, either like it got brushed over or like it came into play later and they had to contemplate on it. Like, there's like levels to the magic that was used, the prophecies that were used, all these things. So I just kind of wanted to touch on it. I am going to be reading from my computer, so if you see me looking down, that is why. So let's get started. The first witch that I'm going to talk about, by the way, which I'm going to be using both as like male and female, as far as even though some of these characters are high priestesses, so it's a little bit higher up in level, but it's just gonna be, I'm just talking about people who have abilities that other characters don't have. Okay, so the first character that I picked out, that I remembered just because it was a very, very funny scene to me, was I'm probably gonna pronounce this wrong, but it was Kinvara, and she is the high priestess of the Red Temple of Volantis. And when they introduced her as the flame of truth, the light of wisdom, the first servant of the Lord of Light. And the Lord of Light is actually one of the gods in Game of Thrones that actually plays a huge role in what happens in Game of Thrones, which is kind of like amazing to me, that a lot of people, either people like kind of forgot how big of a role the Lord of Light ended up playing in the whole thing of Game of Thrones, and some of the other gods who actually had a hand, and the gods that weren't actually doing anything. So there was kind of like a big focus on the Lord of Light, and why was the Lord of Light picking certain people for certain things, and why they had to be in a certain time for a certain place, they had to be saved for specific reasons and resurrected for specific reasons, multiple times even. So there's kind of like this higher purpose, like, I need you to be a pawn in this giant chess game that we're playing. So I thought that specifically was a big deal, especially because of all the magic we had already seen. She came in the 6th season. Melisandre was already doing like a bunch of stuff before she came in, but it was still like, when you heard, oh, the Red Priestesses, you knew some shit was about to go down, because they just are very powerful. They do definitely have a lot of power, a lot of magic. They have a plethora of things that they do. So this is kind of like one of the things that we see, one of the structures that we see that are very, very really much like kind of like a cult, or a coven of witches together, who are very not only self-assured and empowered by their magic, but also are renowned for it. So it was really interesting to me when she came into the scene, because I was just waiting to see what she was going to be like in regards to what we've already seen from a different character as Melisandre, because she's such a badass. So one of the things that she says was that Dany's dragons are a gift from the Lord of Light, which is interesting because the Lord of Light is also the god of fire and light. So anything that has to do with light, that's the Lord of Light. So fire being one of them. So it kind of made it seem like, oh, the Lord of Light was batting for Dany, but then why would the Lord of Light be batting for Dany if the Lord of Light had Melisandre bring Jon back to then him being the one that could get close enough to kill her? So who's the Lord of Light really playing for? It's kind of the thing. And I think ultimately, in many ways, the Lord of Light is answering a lot of prayers for people, because it was always like a fight for good and evil, and like a neutrality of sorts. And it almost seemed like the Lord of Light and like the Three-Eyed Raven were kind of doing a little dance of kind of, we're meeting in the same place, but I'm going to clear the way to get you there. So it's interesting how like that played out and how everybody was in many ways a pawn in the game for different things. So yeah, so she says Dany's dragons are a gift from the Lord of Light, and they're born out of fire. And also her ability to be basically she can't be burned by flames also comes from the Lord of Light. So it's almost like having this blessing from God as far as Dany. And Dany in her own regard is very witchy and bruja herself, just because she does do dream work in the books and the show. And she's able to kind of prophesize some things for herself, but it's not something that I feel like I focused on the characters that are very much certain of their craft. Some people have abilities that they don't end up practicing, but they definitely have. And then you see how their gift ends up being like they make that kind of their own prophecies for themselves. And it's kind of sad because you see that in real life as well, because there's a lot of people that are very unnaturally just, you can tell that they have a gift for whatever reason, whatever medium they kind of fall in, and but they don't practice it enough. So it's just kind of like, it ends up kind of in a way working against them, or being something that ends up being like, hey, if you would have worked on this, maybe this would have turned out a little bit different. So this is kind of interesting with Dany, because she is kind of like that. I mean, I wouldn't say she's like a human character because she has abilities, but she's kind of like that human person that doesn't want to believe in themselves, their own power, just more in the power of how they can affect others in the physical, like what you can see, but not in what you actually believe, and how she believes in herself. And one of her quotes is like, I was believing in myself the whole entire time, but she wasn't completely believing in all of herself, if you think about it in the long run. So she is technically one of the you know, like side mentions to this list, because she is a very powerful witch in her own right, but she's not as boss as these witches that we're going to talk about. So anyway, so one of the things that she also says is that her dragons will purify the non-believers by the thousands, burning their sins and flesh away. And you can kind of talk about what this was referring to, especially with the last season, because her dragon definitely did some stuff. Drogon definitely did some stuff. But for the most part, I feel like she came in very sure of herself as a character. And one of my favorite parts of this scene is when Varys just checks her with the sins of Melisandre, and he's like, oh, well, you know, there was another Red Witch who said that, you know, Stannis was going to be all of this and all of that and all of that. And she really very quickly answers it and stays sure in herself. And what she says is really like interesting, because it just comes up as everything happens for a reason, which is what she says to him. And she checks him with his own past, and she says, you know, it's interesting because for you were in this place, you were, you know, he got, you know, some stuff cut down there, and he was kind of, he built himself up to be the spider, to be this very kind of powerful person in politics in Westeros. And it's like how, like, everything that led to him getting there started from the beginning. And she just says everything happens for a reason, and look at where you are now. And it's kind of just, he has to kind of think about, he has a moment where she starts to tell him, like, do you want me to tell you what was in the flames? And it was just, and his face was just like mortified, because he's usually a character that's also very sure of himself, and knows how to play the Game of Thrones very, very well. But when it comes to the spirituality aspect, he's very much like walking on eggshells. So I thought that was interesting. And what I wrote as far as what the lesson that she is trying to teach, or that you can take from her as a character, is look at the bigger picture. Because when she says like everything happens for a reason, yes, sometimes you have to look at the bigger picture, as people who just work spiritually. And what does it mean to look at the bigger picture? Because I feel like a lot of the time we get stuck on specific things. Like, for example, if you're doing a spell and you want a lover or a specific person, or yeah, let's just stick to that one. Like, if you keep doing a spell work for a specific person, but for some reason that person is just, the spell is just not going through. And it's kind of like later on you find out why it couldn't have been that person, but in the moment you just kept pushing that spell and trying to manipulate and try to do all levels of magic trying to get that to work, and it just wasn't going through for whatever the case, whether the other person's protected, whether the person has his own past to go on, whatever the case may was. And it's just a very interesting thing to think about when we're very kind of tunnel vision focused on what we want in the moment, especially when we're setting intentions for something, instead of being very tunnel visionally, just kind of broadening our perspective and understanding that what we want ultimately, because ultimately when you do a love spell, what is it that you want? Love is a love spell. It's not a specific, yes, you can target specific people, but at the end of the day, it's a love spell. That's what it's called. Like if you're doing healing work, your ultimate goal is to heal something. And it might not end up being, and it might not ever end up like flowing the way you intended it to go, or like in the path you intended to go, but it's happened for a reason, and the steps and the things that come after that are happening for reasons. One of those reasons could be the spell work that you did as well. So there's like layers to her lesson, because sometimes I feel like we do have to look at the bigger picture, and we have to disconnect. And this is a very kind of Aquarius type of mentality, because a lot of the time, in order for us to learn the lesson, we really need, and Aquarius does this very well, disconnects from everything, from society, to really see, hey, okay, what are the issues? Where am I at? Okay, I see that this changed. I didn't actually notice that till I took a step back and just like really reflected. So it's just a very, not only understanding even the bad things that happen, that they do happen for a reason, but also looking at the bigger picture and how it all comes together. Whether it is you went through hell and now you're in a different place and you had to grow from that, but who are you now, and why did you need to learn that? Why did you need to be this way? Why did what you went through had to be the thing that made you stronger, or put you in this place where now you are reflecting on this. So this kind of like a lot of little lessons that she kind of brings in, where it's just like, hey, don't tunnel vision focus, really look at the bigger picture, step back, have moments where you really disconnect to kind of really connect to your own power as well, because you also have to believe that what you want is gonna happen, and just letting that flow as it will, not as you want it to be, but as it will. So that's one. Now the second person that we're going to talk about is Miri Madour, and she is, and I'm going to probably pronounce her name wrong a little bit, but she is a magi, and so she practices blood magic. That's one of her powers. She's a healer. She practices herbal magic. She's also in the books a shadow binder as well. She has like some history on that. And we're going to talk about shadow binders a little bit more when we get to Melisandre, even though Kinbarno was also a shadow binder. But one of the quote that I picked for her was specifically when Drogo was on, like, basically he had the cut, and like she had kind of patched him up, but he was just kind of like almost like the infection was getting to him. And she says to Dany, he's beyond a healer's skills. I can only ease his path. And the lesson that she brings throughout her whole kind of story arc, if you really look at it, is the duality of magic, because it ends up going from she mentions it towards the end, where she's telling Dany, like, you know, I have healed like so many people, and I'm like the healer of like my town, and I did so many good things. So what exactly did you save me from? Because I was someone who did good, but then I got, you know, all these bad things to me happen because they came in. So it's kind of like she went and used darker magic in order to address the situation, which I can argue that she was very numb by it by the end of it. Like her actions were very like dismissive, like, hey, I'm just here and I'm just gonna just blood magic this and have some fun with it. Like she really was like not giving any types of fucks like throughout the whole entire time. It was kind of really interesting to me. But it really talks about the duality of magic, and kind of in reflection of Dany, how you kind of want something so bad, you'll kind of ask for whatever way you can get it. You will ask for magic to happen, but you're not specifically saying, hey, there has to be some spell. Yes, there has to be some spell, but you don't know if it has to be like bad. And then when she finds out, oh yeah, we're gonna kill his horse, like it's just like, okay, there has to be some sort of like payment for this. So when it comes to blood magic and when it comes to like those type of topics, because as blood magic is not necessarily a bad thing, blood magic has been practiced throughout many lifetimes in many different ways, and it's not always a bad thing, because blood magic can be done in positive ways. It's just that this was not an example of a positive way to practice blood magic. So in this, when we're talking about the duality of magic, is really about what we consider, like in that quote, she says, he's beyond all healer's skills. Healers are considered to be positive things, right? Because we're basically trying to make something bad go away. We're trying to heal something. We're trying to remove a negative thing. So it's being associated with a positive thing. So when she says, you know, it's a very like, I can't do the positive anymore. It's I can only ease the path. And what does easing the path look like for someone like her? Because when you talk about even easing someone's path, is kind of like a mercy killing in many ways, even though maybe she could have done a different spell that would have just kind of numbed them out, but that's kind of what she did with the blood magic. So it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? You know, so there is a duality of magic, and understanding and respecting the duality of magic, understanding and respecting your own will in the duality of magic, and what you're willing to do to get what you want, and what the consequences are for what range you're trying to fall on, whether light or dark, whatever it is, there is a duality, and not everything is going to come out exactly the way that you want it to, depending on which one you use as well. So that's the lesson that she brings to the story, is really about the duality, because a lot of people just have this connotation that, you know, witches can just make whatever they want appear and all these things, but it really depends how you're working and what energy you're working with, and how you're working your own energy and working your magic. So it can be very dangerous. It can be very positive. It has this light and dark, and that's just understanding that. So the next person that we're going to talk about is Maggie the Frog, and I really kind of loved her scene because it was just really cool. Even in the books, it was just really cool. But she is a wood witch, and she practices herbal magic, healing magic. She's known for that, divination, and also blood magic. So she can divine with blood, which is a really cool scene to see. But the quote I picked for her was, everyone wants to know their future until they know their future. This is so important. The lesson that she is bringing, that I wrote down, is prophecies are a dangerous thing for the mind to obsess over. I'm going to repeat that. Prophecies are a dangerous thing for the mind to obsess over. Why is that the lesson? And I say this because this was a very divination scene, and it was a short scene. When you like get a reading, or when you get like even an astrology, like a yearly like astrology chart, or your solar return chart, whatever it is, like when you get like even monthlies or whatnot, in many ways those can be seen as prophecies, because if you know that a planet is in its spitting and it's you could be like, okay, well this could possibly, and then if you fall in the trap of kind of obsessing over what that looks like instead of working with the energy, you can really fall into a mental trap of anxiety over it, over kind of forcing it to happen, over like really overthinking things that might not actually be for you, because there's some houses that will play out like the magic and the events that come from the house that's in, like for Jupiter, for example, is not always gonna look the same. Like if you look at where Jupiter is in your house, like falling in for this year, because he is in Sag, and if you look at where he's at for this year, just because he's in your house of like, I don't know, your 5th house or your 4th house or your 3rd house, or your second house doesn't mean that it like, just like second house, for example, your house of value and money, doesn't mean that you're just gonna get $1 million out of nowhere, and that you're just gonna have like a bunch of things. It can mean that you're gonna overspend your money. It can mean that you're gonna be traveling a lot and using your savings. It can mean different things. It literally can manifest in different ways, but the energy is there for this thing. So you know that this thing is happening, like Jupiter is in Sag, right? For that year. So you know stuff is coming, but you cannot specifically just sit there and be like, okay, this is what this is. You have to remain open. And this is why I say prophecies are a dangerous thing for the mind to obsess over, because a lot of the times people who get readings or stuff like that, like I've seen people be like, oh my God, I was told that it was going to be like, they were going to look like this. And even to themselves, like people who have abilities, that they will sit there and be like, this is what I dreamt about and this is how it's coming and I see it and blah, blah, blah. And then it turns up, especially with dreams, tricky, and then it turns up when it actually manifests in real life that it doesn't look exactly the same, but it feels exactly the same it was supposed to, or the outcome is the way that it was supposed to, but is not exactly in the order that you divined it or thought it was going to be. And this happens a lot with dream work. I notice with people, like they kind of get hung up, especially when it comes to people, like if you dreamt your soulmate or something like that of the sort, or someone you're gonna meet or something like that. Sometimes you can see how they look like in this lifetime, but a lot of people don't think about the fact that they could have been seeing them and recognizing them in their dreams and how they looked like in a past lifetime, which happens more often than not. But you know, this is kind of the thing, like when you prophesize something, especially with dream work, because I do a lot of dream work, and I sometimes like even my sister, for example, she's dreamt of people's death and passings before, and it's been accurate, but it's also we don't worry about like timing and like it's the specifics. It's just mainly the main message, but we don't obsess over them, because then it's always just like, oh my God, I dreamt that thing. And you know what, it's mainly that when it happens, you were meant to have some sort of awareness. So it's more of a understand that you might need to have that awareness for whatever reason, but we're not always supposed to obsess over the information that we get. It's mostly like, okay, I'm aware that this is the energy that's coming, or this is the energy of my life. It might not come in the specific way I'm seeing it or the specific way I'm being told about it, but that type of energy is a coming. But let me not obsess over it. Let me just let it come. But I am aware. Okay, it's almost like if you're at the train station and you know the train is coming, but you're just not gonna look at the time. You're just gonna wait for it to come because you know it's taking you somewhere. That's literally what it is. And I really love that quote. Everybody wants to know the future until they know the future, because a lot of times, especially with reading, and tarot checks you all the time. Tarot does not care about it. Just does not care. You will ask a question and it'll be answering something else, because sometimes you need to know something else. But that's really what it is. It's like everybody wants to know the future until they know the future, and then when you know, you're just like, wait, I wanted something else, or I was thinking about something, and then why? And then you'll end up seeing how it develops later. For this, it was with Cersei, and it really just came to pass. It didn't come to pass. Well, it came to pass exactly as she said. It was meant to in the show, because it's the show, you know. But yeah, so I wanted to point out her as a lesson, even though she was a very short character. I did want to point out because it was just such a powerful scene, as far as I'm concerned. Next, we're going to talk about my favorite one from this whole list. Who is my favorite? My favorite character from Game of Thrones is definitely Arya, but this is my second favorite, borderline almost my favorite, because it's just these two. She's just such a boss. But Melisandre is the next person that we're going to talk about. And for her quote, I picked, "Even those who don't serve the Lord can serve his cause." And of course, the night is dark and full of terrors, but the fire burns them all away. And with Melisandre, she's a very powerful person. She's a shadow binder. She also worships the Lord of Lights. Dream interpretation, divination, intuitive blood magic, resurrection, pyrokinesis, glamour magic, resisting poison and cold. Like, homegirl, this is what I'm talking about. Like, priestess. She's a priestess. Technically not a full, like, she's a priestess. And she's just such a bomb character. Like, I felt like she's just such a bomb character, but she really kind of made one of the mistakes that I feel like some people make in the community, which is a kind of like, some people really blow smoke up their ass sometimes. Not saying that she doesn't need to blow smoke up her ass, but you see how in the last season she got humble. That's really the type of spiritual person that you need to be a lot of the time, because it's not about filling in the blanks, which is what she said she ended up doing. She knew that her visions were coming and they were correct, but she was trying to fill in the gaps and fill in some of the holes of what she couldn't answer completely. So she was given the gift of seeing, but she couldn't see the whole picture, so she tried to fill in the blanks, and that's not something that you should do, because it will get you into trouble, especially if you say something like, even if it can be weird, because when you're following your intuition and you can argue, oh, she was following her intuition, it can be a little bit tricky, because it's almost like you're using your confidence to kind of guide your intuition to go somewhere where it might not be accurate, just because you're trying to make whatever prophecy you've seen, whatever thing you've seen, come to life in whatever way, shape, or form. So that was her biggest downfall, besides, you know, burning a child alive. But the reason why she's one of my favorite characters is just because she's a very complex character, and you learn a lot from her, and also you see so much that she can do, and like that the Red Priestesses can do, and what I picked as her lesson was, the road doesn't always look like how you divined it to be, because that is the lesson that you can learn from Melisandre. And it's really true. You can see a lot of things, and you can kind of like let your intuition guide you, and whether or not you have different abilities to be able to see different, like especially the future, and you're able to kind of see something coming, or even whether in astrology or whatever medium you're using. At the same time, it might not, the road to it, you might know something, but the road to it might not be straight. You know, it might not be linear. It might look like a zigzag. It might go around a couple times and then move somewhere. You know, you have to kind of let things develop. Just because you know something doesn't mean that is going to come to life and bring fruit exactly the way that you envisioned it, exactly the way you dreamt it. It's just not gonna happen that way. A lot of the times we get messages as sometimes a warning, sometimes for us to understand that we have a role to play in situations, and that's really how she felt like she had a role to play, and she was really trying to make it just happen. She was kind of guiding herself, but she really let herself fill in blanks where she shouldn't have. And then towards the end, you see her being a little bit more, she still was very much predicting different things, even with Varys in the mountain, where she said, I have to die in the strange land, and so do you. She knew he was gonna die in that land. So in literally where they were, in Dragonstone. So it was just like, his face was just like, and it was just like, she knew that, but the other bigger picture things that have to do with multiple people, that with different parties that are playing on this huge game, don't fill in the blanks completely. Know that there's a part to play. Know the important characters in there. Know who you might need to assist or work with, but don't try to completely influence their like will into doing or acting upon that. Like whichever characters are supposed to fall as they may, they will kind of end up coming together, which is what happened. And she did bring Jon and Dany together. But she also knew why she had to do that, because she knew that Jon, like, the Lord, like, brought him back. So it had to be for a reason. And then it became of, okay, let me wait for the reason. Like, if this happened, that means there's a reason for it. And then that's kind of how it played out. So the road doesn't always look like you defined it to be. Very, very powerful lesson, especially as readers, especially if you do read your own cards and stuff like that. Let things develop. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't just try to fill in blanks or try to be like, it's a sign. Because I feel like the spiritual community does that a lot. We always be like, it's a sign. That was a sign. This was a sign. That was a sign. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of the time, we really just need to be like, oh, I see that. Okay. And just stay within our own and kind of watch things play out and kind of play our role when we need to play our role, but not over playing our role You know what I'm saying? Okay, so the last one on this list, I don't know if y'all can guess who it is, like, but obviously it's gonna be Bran. Obviously it's gonna be the king of all the goddamn kingdoms except for the north. And the reason why Bran Stark is in this list is because homeboy has abilities, and he's one of the most powerful people in the show and in the books as well. So Bran is a green seer. That includes dream work, can influence events. He cannot change some events, but he can influence events, but he can't change the main outcome of some of the events, because some things are certain for sure. He's also a warg, so he can control like physically and the mind of animals and people, because we saw that, as if it was his own body. And he's also the three-eyed raven, which is kind of like the master level of being, you know, having the gift as a green seer, green sight, and having to kind of take on the role as the third eye, the third eye raven. So the quote that I picked for Bran was, "My dreams are different." And it's because, like, if you look at the first season, he just kind of was in his head a lot, and he kind of really reminded me of those kind of people that in different religions and different practices and different just spiritual practices, where you kind of just disconnect from the world. You go up in a mountain, you go meditate, you just disconnect, or you're just in your head a lot, and you're processing things from throat, third eye, crown mainly. You're not like really grounding. You're not trying to have the lower energies. You're really trying to be up here. So this it was just a very powerful thing, because for Bran, his dreams was actually happening. A lot of it was actually happening. He could control a lot of things from there. He could see a lot of things past, present, and it was just, and future. So he had this ability. He has this ability to be very knowledgeable and very intelligent, and he literally played the Game of Thrones the best out of anybody else. And a lot of people, it really, even when I watched the show, the finale, I was a little bit peeved as to how he got picked as the king. Like, I really was. But when he really dropped that line talking about, "Why do you think I came all this way over here, not for you to like crown my ass king," I kind of knew that he really played the game better than anybody else. And the reason for that is because there were a lot of things that he knew that he didn't speak about. He spoke about certain things when asked, but he also didn't give too much detail. And this kind of summarizes some of the other lessons that we learned in this video, because a lot of it is really discernment, and a lot of it has to do with kind of reeling back and not kind of being a really loud person in the room, or loud, like in the kind of the way Melisandre was trying to manipulate everything because she knew something. Bran was doing the opposite. He was kind of playing his part in the game, but he wouldn't have to tell you everything that was going on. He didn't have to tell you that he saw that he was gonna end up being king either, because I'm pretty sure he knew that for a while. I'm pretty sure he knew, and you could see it in his face, that Arya was gonna kill the Night King, because when she chose to take the dagger, because that's one of the things that I felt like he influenced, which was her taking the dagger, that she was gonna be the one to kill him. So it kind of was like a very, if you look at that scene, he's almost like relieved about it, and it's like he can influence choices, but he can't change the main picture. So he's gonna end up in the throne somehow, and the Night King's gonna die somehow, but he can also see who his players are. So it's very much about kind of manipulating the game, but not in a way where you're trying to get everybody to do exactly what they need to be just because you saw it. I feel like he definitely has more of a sight than Melisandre does, obviously, because he can see the past, present, and future, and she can only see certain things that she's been given the access to see and divine in the moment, and even as comebacks, because Homegirl be having moments where Melisandre just be coming back at you with facts, like sometimes, like with Varys, for example, on the mountain. But yeah, so the lesson that I picked for Bran is be patient, let what you know unfold as it may, which is really important, because again, if you know something's coming, whether you're doing spell work, whether you divined it, whether somebody told you, whether somebody did a reading for you, let it happen as they may. Just understand that you have an awareness that is something is coming of the sort. Don't obsess over it, because that was one of the other lessons. Prophecies are a dangerous thing for the mind to obsess over. So if you know something, it can very much become a prophecy, because it's just like, no, but I know this to be true. But I know. This is what I know. So, you know, it's kind of hard to argue with someone that doesn't like kind of like budge. It's almost like being having the higher consciousness and just pulling back, humbling your mind a little bit, understanding what you know, being grateful of what you know, adapting to what you know, but not letting yourself want to force things to happen because of what you know. Also not like especially when it came to Maggie the Frog, with prophecies are a dangerous thing for the mind to obsess over. Like, everyone wants to know the future until they know their future. And if you look at that quote, it goes hand in hand with Bran, because he didn't want to be king, but he knew he was going to end up king. So it's kind of like, you know, he was probably the most pulled back person in the show, who didn't overly obsess of what he knew about. He just really let everything just flow, and when he had to play a role in different situations, he really played that role for himself. So yeah, so those are the 5 lessons that I chose for this video in regards to the witches of Game of Thrones. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was really cool. I was kind of been putting it together for a couple of weeks now. It just took me some time because I was trying to like get all the pieces together. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe,